Hi everyone, my name is Winkate, and I'll be speaking to you today about how can I be ethical and still make money. You wonder why I chose this really clickbaity title. It's because I work as a lecturer for the European College of Business and Management in London, apart from being the advisory board member for Lucy and Yuck. And most students that come to my class, the first question they ask is, how can I be ethical and still make money? Most of them are business students, and this is the reason they attend my courses. So I will try to answer that question for you today by trying to look into how to be ethical and then look at how to make money. The company I advise is Lucy and Yuck, so I am their advisory board member. But who is Lucy and Yuck? Lucy and Yuck is a sustainable fashion brand and an ethical brand as well, and they are responsible because of how and what they produce. So they mainly refer to sustainable materials. They're made from organic, recycled, or dead stock fabrics. They have a timeless design in terms of how you can use their fabrics or how you can use their fashion. They're versatile, they're comfortable, and basically it can be worn everywhere. They also try to access high quality materials, and they rely heavily on certification as a way to verify that they're on the right track. They also have a circular business model, so they have a buyback campaign or program where if you don't like your clothing, you can bring them back to the stores, they will purchase it from you, or you can get money off your next purchase. They also purchase imperfect clothing from their suppliers so that no clothing from Lucy and Yuck goes back to the landfill, and these products are also offered to their customers. They have the React marketplace, so they do offer ways of selling the products that you don't want to have anymore on platforms such as Facebook, Depop, or Vinted in Germany as well. And they have their own in-store upcycling and repair programs where if your clothing is torn, please don't throw it away, bring it back and we will repair it for you in the stores. So they have ways of making sure that the product they produce are brought back to the economy. Now, what is my role and why was I hired by Lucy and Yuck to come into the company? The business started with a very good intentions to do good. They wanted to be a good business, but they didn't know how. They kind of stumbled into being an ethical and sustainable brand because the customers required them to be. But they didn't know how to go about it. My role as the advisor at Lucy and Yuck is to look at the behavioral aspect of the organization. I'm not looking at the quantitative numbers, I'm looking at how you do business. I'm looking at the qualitative factors. This is important because most of us ask ourselves, why do even good businesses fall short of their ethical obligations? And I believe it's because the qualitative measures we use to assess whether a business is doing good, they're too numerical, they're too data-driven, and they're too mechanical. But I believe that these measures are important, but in some way they're limiting and they don't give us a true awareness of why unethical practices happen in the organization. So when unethical practices happen, they go unnoticed or they're noticed too late. A good analysis of where the company is headed, in my opinion, requires us to speak about the touchy-feely, qualitative, from the gut factors that are minimized, but in my opinion are very important in understanding why do we behave unethically. So in order to provide companies from going the ethical cliff, from going down that road, I think it's important to understand why do we behave unethically within the organization. The model I will be using today to understand the science of ethical collapse was developed by Marianne Jennings in an attempt to introduce a tool that analyzes the qualitative factors that allow companies to drift off their moral path. I will use 4 of the 7 signs today because we don't have time. Now, the starting premise or the starting claim or the 7 signs are based on the assumptions that all organizations are alike, Their cultures are identical, and their collapses become predictable. Some of you might agree, some of you might disagree. If you might disagree, it's okay. But this claim is based on the premise that companies do not descend into the depth of misdeed overnight, nor do they descend alone. For them to get away with what they're doing, they need a fairly large amount of staff to look the other way or be silent about what is going on in the organization. And also, regulations and legislation do not always help. There are not enough lawyers, legislators, seminars and conferences like this that can find every possible loophole that is out there. It is argued that, for instance, it takes the FASB 2 years to come up with a regulation within the financial industry, and it takes investment bankers 2 weeks to find a loophole or to find a way around it. So legislations and regulations are important, but they're not enough. Penalties that come from acting unethical increase with each massive regulatory reform, as do the size of the frauds and collapses. We witness that companies do not stop acting unethically if they face a penalty. Yeah? Penalties will not solve the underlying problems of unethical behavior, and they're not the cure for unethical behavior. Yeah? The last point is legal changes create artificial hope that massive regulations will stop ethical collapses. But this is a simple solution of how, when, and what to do, but it's not a prevention of ethical collapses. In the past, this has not prevented companies from acting unethically and will not prevent them from acting unethically in the future. So legal changes are important, but they're not the solution. Now, the focus of Jennings' tool is to look into the ethical culture of the organization. It's trying to help us understand how people operate within the organization. How can we help employees within the organization to detect ethical failures and report them or address them? The prevention of unethical behavior is therefore key. So we need to stop companies from marching into the cliff of unethical behavior, and we need to look more than the return on equity or return on investment and other financial measures. We need to look into what does it mean to be ethical or sustainable within the organization, and look at the quality that is driven from being unethical. According to Jennings, there are 7 warnings that are easily observed from the outside, and that's how I come into Lucy Enyaq. I can observe these signs by looking into how the company operates. These signs are easily observed from the outside and easily understood from the inside. So once you start speaking with the employees, they will give you this information. Yeah? The first sign she listed is pressure to maintain those numbers. Study shows that CFOs are more likely or have felt a lot of pressure from their CEOs and are more likely to actually make up numbers in the favor of the organization. The pressure has also been identified in non-profit organizations where the leaders of these organizations make promises to raise a given number, and they put pressure on their staff to meet those numbers. The pressure is so great that judgment is impaired, and fraud schemes are born based on this pressure to maintain numbers. Universities also face this pressure, where there's a pressure to achieve specific rankings or to achieve specific ratings. These organizations are all different in terms of what they do, but the pressure is the same. The other sign of ethical collapse is classified as fear and silence. The problem here does not lie in employees not seeing the ethical issue. The problem lies in choosing not to raise the issue, in choosing not to speak about the issue, or not having the avenue of raising the issue. The phenomenon of employee silence is maybe due to fear of no longer fitting in the company. This phenomenon is actually well documented in workplace surveys. Social conformity pressure to fit into the organizational culture concludes that most of us do not speak up even if we see something wrong is going on in the organization. We choose to remain silent. Even the most honorable people have felt the pressure or are submissive to this culture of fear and silence for various very valid reasons, such as loyalty and honesty, which can lead to moral muteness, where you purposefully silence yourself from speaking up because you want to show loyalty towards your organization or loyalty towards your colleague. A good example is when we look into the police industry or the police departments. We all have heard of corrupt cops. But why does this happen, and why are so few police officers willing to speak up? You understand the dilemma between being loyal to your colleagues, being loyal to the institution, because you rely on them to protect you when you go out there. You want to know that your colleague is going to have your back no matter what. So this aspect of being loyal to the institution, being loyal to your colleagues, might bring people to be silent when they see unethical behavior happening in the organization, and might actually choose not to be honest about what is actually happening in the organization. So this culture of fear and silence is very prominent in most industries or in most organizations. Now, what fuels a culture of fear and silence and the pressure of meeting numbers? Jennings argued that these organizations that are headed to an ethical collapse have two structural components that enable a culture of fear and silence and create pressure for numbers. One, the structural component that fuels fear and silence is the presence of an iconic CEO that is adored by the community, the media, and just everybody that from the outside is looking into the organization. Now, employees of an iconic CEO fall into the fear of silence trap, as they don't want to challenge this CEO where everybody is seeing their aura and everybody is understanding their mission. So you tend not to speak up, and you fear to speak up because what if you are wrong? What if the CEO is right and you are the one that is wrong? If everybody else is seeing their charisma and is understanding their intelligence, who am I to speak up against this iconic CEO? And one other characteristic is that these CEOs surround themselves with a specific type of employee. They surround themselves with a management team that looks up to them and adores them to a fault. And most often, these unjustified flattery stems from the youth and inexperience of these staff members. These young employees don't have enough experience or wisdom to even challenge the CEO. And the CEO has also roped them in with executive successes. So you as a young person, an inexperienced employee, think, okay, do I challenge the CEO and go against what he or she is saying and lose the prestige and success that comes from working with the CEO? So you tend to be silent. As a result of it, you do not challenge the CEO. The other sign of ethical collapse is innovation like no other. This company enjoyed tremendous success initially because they have a unique approach to business, they have a unique product, they're introducing something into the industry that nobody has seen before. So they enjoy this enormous success with their innovation. However, this innovation is too fast for ethical detail. So the CEOs that mostly introduce these innovations, they are bright, they're energetic, they're motivated, but what lacks is the ethical eye. Now, there's also a certain amount of arrogance that comes with big innovations, especially in an established industry. And this arrogance stems from this unique and high achievement that they have accomplished within the industry, and they will never subscribe to Newton's law that what goes up must come down. And in order to maintain that level of success, they're willing to even make up numbers to show or make up ways of how business should be done differently in order to stay at the top. In order not to admit that we have actually failed. We actually do not know what we're doing. So they pledge to finding new ways of keeping things up, including fraud when circumstances are warranted. Now, this is not to say that innovation is bad. This is not to say that innovation causes ethical collapse. Rather, innovation without other tools of business, including ethics and sustainability, the company will experience ethical collapse. When I'm going to I'm not going to give specific examples, but if we think about the concept of WeWorks, yeah, they started off as a very innovative and very good company. If we look at how the company developed over the years and how the CEOs acted within these companies, it's questionable. If you think of Theranos, have you ever heard of Theranos? Another good example of how an iconic CEO actually made up numbers and made up assumption of what the product could do, when in reality it was a bogus product. Yeah, but they did not want to admit that they have an innovation that doesn't work. In return, they started making up ideas and making up numbers to justify why the product is good. Yeah. The other sign of ethical collapse is goodness in some areas and tones of evil in others. Both on an individual and corporate level, the fallen ones in these ethical collapses all perceive themselves as good people. They would not say they have bad intentions. They actually have good ideas and good intentions. They are active in philanthropic giving and fundraising. These companies and individuals use the balancing scale. I used that example yesterday where I said you have like a pot of moral coins in that pot, and that pot is filled up because you are a good organization. So taking out a few coins by acting unethical is not that bad, because in general we are a good organization. We do good. So taking out a few unethical coins or taking out a few moral coins is justified because we have this balancing scale. So as long as we're good to the environment, as long as we have strong diversity, we are involved in the community, we are generous with our charitable givings, schemes and frauds at work are not a problem. It is kind of justified. And this is especially important if you look at managers of NGOs. Yeah, so nonprofit organizations are particularly vulnerable because they feel so noble in their work that unethical behavior is justified. I don't know whether you've heard of Renee Bach with her activities in Uganda and how, it's a long story, I'm going to tell you afterwards. But this is a good example of how a non-profit organization or a person with good intentions actually did horrible things in communities and justified it as, I'm actually a good person. I'm actually the organization is actually good, but he had no idea about how to be a medical person and treat people properly. So she justified her unethical behavior with the idea that we are actually good. We are not that horrible. Why is this tool important? Now, I need to say and acknowledge that every company has one or more of the 7 signs. However, not every company is at risk of ethical collapses. Some may show these signs for honest, straightforward business reasons. However, these signs can be used as a guide. Analysts can get an understanding of these factors when trying to look into how is the business operating. Yeah. Investors can look at these signs for potential ethical collapses. Employees can especially use this tool as a way of being more self-aware of when they are unwitting accomplices of the collapse. For instance, why was no one comfortable reflecting to reflect on the decision and question whether it was ethical? And if we did, why was no one in the company available to be spoken to or to speak to? Yeah, so this is a way of that employees, investors, or analysts or consultants can understand how the company is operating, not only what the company is doing. The difference between a company at risk and one that collapses lies in control. I'm not saying that control is bad, yeah, but I'm referring to the aspect of being controlling. A little fear of the CEO is not bad. The fear of telling the CEO the truth is bad. Now, there's another aspect of feedback. We don't want to hear negative feedback in companies, even as it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how successful you are. Lauren Eslen Winkler, who's a psychologist at Northwestern University, argued in how we process feedback. She argued that failure makes everyone feel terrible. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how successful you are, it doesn't matter how small the failure is. Failure bruises the ego. People also who receive negative feedback learn significantly less than those who receive positive feedback. I see that in my classes as well. As soon as I give a certain student positive feedback, they're attentive, they're listening, they're motivated. Those who receive negative feedback do not display the same amount of enthusiasm. They're more locked up. They put their heads in the sand. Yeah. So there is a weakness of receiving negative feedback, which is also linked to the fear of bad news. The resistance of bad news is linked to that. There are specific examples that show, for instance, investors would stop checking their stock portfolios when the stock market drops. There is a fear of receiving bad news, even if it's helpful. There is another study that showed that situations where participants refuse to return to healthcare centers to get their sexual health results over the fear of receiving bad news. So we often go out of our way and put our heads in the sand to avoid bad news, even when this information is useful to us. Now, what leads from that is that we feel that our ego is bruised, which can lead to the sour grape effect. The sour grape effect is a systematic tendency to downplay the value of something when you can't attain it. We have all faced a situation where you want to reach something and you fail, you say, I didn't want it in the first place. So you downplay the value of that goal by saying, it wasn't important to me anyways. Yeah, because your ego is bruised. To prevent that, you tried making excuses why that goal was not interesting to you in the first place. And failure also feels like a waste of time. Imagine putting the effort, the money, the energy, the time into working on this project, and then in the end you fail. You felt like you have wasted a lot of time in this project, and for what? So failure can be demoralizing, or receiving negative feedback can be demoralizing. Yeah? So that's why in the organizations we say, don't tell me, I don't want to hear it. Now, so for emotional reasons, we don't want to hear feedback, but we need to hear that feedback. Since we now understood how to holistically assess our company's potential unethical traits, let's understand, who are we selling to? Who are we making money from? I would like to look at Gen Z. Gen Z, as we know, will become the largest consumer demographic in the next years. They're still coming of age, they're still learning, but they're already displaying passionate activism and unwavering care and acceptance of others. They're bold to challenge traditional norms and reinvent themselves and their beliefs. Their traits will serve them well as they reshape the workplace, economy, and the society. Here are 3 areas that I will refer to when trying to understand who is Gen Z. Gen Z value a far more diversified workplace than previous generations. Therefore, dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace is not simply a nice to have for them, it's an expectation. Gen Z employees believe that they're more than their job and want their employees to know the same. However, given the economic, social, and political trauma they have faced in their short lives, they are prepared to work hard and to develop their careers and achieve security. However, this is also reflected in their higher levels of stress and anxiety. Because of the social and political trauma they have experienced, they're more prone to stress, and addressing mental health at the workplace is important. The focus on ethics and social awareness of a company is just as important. So they're no longer looking at the quality of the products and services. They're looking at the company's commitment to doing good in all areas. When it comes to their shopping behavior, they display minimalistic secondhand shopping, they care for ethical certification, and support minority-owned businesses. When it comes to transparent communication, Gen Z value brands that are transparent, open about their ethical journey, and care about balanced reporting. Tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly. When it comes to the social part and how they show up in society, Gen Z are known for being passionate about various social and environmental issues, and they're actively participating in activism. They're interested in diversity, inclusion, sustainability, they're digital natives, and they display a strong entrepreneurial spirit. They're not afraid to start their own businesses and to show how business can be done differently. This is a double-edged sword if you refer to the previous ethical science of ethical collapse. They possess a moral compass and the willingness to start their own path rather than conform to harmful norms, even within the society and organization. However, this generation is a generation of paradoxes. Despite their social values, Gen Zs are 1.4 times more likely to report that money stresses them out. And they're 5 times less likely to be disciplined with their spending. More and more studies are revealing that Gen Z are shopping on a large scale from mainstream providers that I will not mention right now. Providers who need to be questioned about their ethical and sustainability efforts, especially within fashion. Fast fashion is very prominent within Gen Z consumer. So Gen Zs are well aware of the damaging aspects of fast fashion consumption, but they can't help themselves then shop from fast fashion businesses. It's very important to understand why did they behave this way. Why do they consume far too much fast fashion and are willing to accept the guilty conscience for fleeting and environmental harmful trends? When it comes to their sustainable consciousness, they're more likely than other generations to disconnect their green purchasing behaviors from their values. This dissonance stems from the internal battle between their strong moral values and their baseline expectation for instant, on-demand, and seamless experiences. Being digital natives has allowed them to have access to products and services on the spot. So bridging this gap between wanting to be slow but having fast experiences is what businesses need to do. Greenwashing is another factor. It is assumed that Gen Zs are more likely to distrust and avoid greenwashing, which is true. However, they're also more likely to trust brands' intentions to do good. So being open and honest about your sustainability and an environmental journey is more important than greenwashing. Now, so any company that can help resolve this conflict, in my opinion, stands to win with the Gen Z generation. So how do you sell to a contradictory consumer? Ask yourself, are you truly an authentic brand? Look at your messages, your values, supply chain, and how you treat your employees and ask, are your words and actions in alignment? To be truly authentic, brands must also champion their values internally. Gen Z believe diversity and inclusion are not superficial promises that are made in mission statements. They need to be reflected in how and who you employ in your companies. So, customers or Gen Z customers do not expect brands to be perfect. They want to interact with authentic brand. They want to have this dialogue with brands. So consider how you can communicate your company's passion. Use the power of user-generated content, which is a great way to allow your consumers to communicate to you about their passion. Try to align that. Gen Zs can also not be sold to. You can't sell to the Gen Z. They reject this glossy, Instagrammable, perfect aesthetics and favor in return unfiltered, authentic, and relatable companies or relatable styles. They want to be invited to honest conversations where their opinion counts and their expectation for engagement with the brands are met. Gen Z share on social media and they want to have the same of authentic vulnerability and sincerity from brands as well. So provide an authentic experience with the brand, address eco-anxiety with authentic, honest, and empowering storytelling. And also, I would like to go back to the aspect of feedback. There is a power in negative feedback. In reality, it's really important to take note of how people who have failed many times before they succeed. I think the message we get from that is wrong. We believe that the lesson of failure is an obstacle. All we need is to overcome this obstacle, keep pushing, and eventually we will come to success. I believe we focus too much on success. We need to see failure as a way of learning. If we push too much into being successful, we start performing and stop learning. So seeing feedback as good news, seeing feedback as a space that allows us to grow and learn is a change of perspective. It is a change of understanding the power of negative feedback because it allows you to grow. And this is one lesson I shared with Lucy and Yak where they saw a lot of shitstorm online. Rather than accepting their message, they started pushing back. They started performing. Take a minute, stop, breathe. What is the consumer telling you? They're allowing you to grow in the right direction. So this means extract the ego from the experience. Learn from others in the industry. They have received negative feedback. It's not feedback to you directly, but if you look at what the feedback says, there are lessons that can be learned from that feedback. And understanding that failure is an integral part of the journey to success. We focus too much on success and little on the failure as part of being successful. The lessons you get from failing are lessons you would never get if you were succeeding. So see it as an opportunity to grow and learn something from your journey to becoming an ethical and sustainable brand. Thanks.